Debt isn't always the bad guy. Some of it is quietly making you richer. Some of it is quietly destroying you. And if you treat all debt the same way, you're going to make some really expensive mistakes. So let's actually break it down. The difference isn't about how the debt makes you feel. It's not about whether you're irresponsible for having it. It comes down to two things: the interest rate and what the debt is buying you. Good debt tends to have a low interest rate, and it buys you something that either goes up in value over time or increases your ability to earn money. Bad debt tends to carry a high interest rate, and it buys you something that loses value or nothing lasting at all. That's the whole framework. Everything else is just applying it. The clearest example of good debt is a mortgage. When you take out a mortgage to buy a home, you're borrowing money to purchase an asset. Historically, real estate tends to go up in value over time. So while you're paying interest on the loan, the thing you bought with it is, in most markets over long enough periods, appreciating. You're building equity. You're converting a monthly payment into ownership. Compare that to renting, where every dollar you pay goes to your landlord and you own nothing at the end. A mortgage isn't free money, and it's not without risk, but the structure is working in your favor. You're using borrowed money to build something real. Mortgage rates also tend to be relatively low compared to other types of debt, and the interest is often tax deductible. That matters. Low rate, appreciating asset. That's good debt doing what good debt is supposed to do. Student loans are where the good debt versus bad debt line gets blurry, and people argue about this a lot. Here's the honest answer. It depends entirely on what the degree does for your income. If you took out $40,000 in student loans to get a nursing degree and you're now making $75,000 a year, that debt worked. You borrowed money to increase your earning power, and it paid off. The debt had a return. If you took out $80,000 in student loans for a degree that leads to a $38,000 a year job, the math is a lot harder to defend. You borrowed more than you'll comfortably be able to repay without it following you for a decade or more. The rule of thumb a lot of financial advisors use: try not to borrow more in total student loans than you expect to earn in your first year after graduation. It's not perfect, but it forces you to think about the return on the investment, because that's what education is: an investment. And like any investment, it can go well or it can go badly depending on the choices you make. Federal student loans, by the way, are generally better than private ones. Lower rates, income-based repayment options, and some forgiveness programs depending on your career path. If you're still in school or about to be, that distinction matters. Car loans are interesting because almost everyone needs one, and almost everyone finances one. But cars are also one of the fastest depreciating assets you can buy. The moment you drive a new car off the lot, it loses roughly 10 to 20% of its value. By the end of year 5, it's worth around 40% of what you paid. So if you borrowed $30,000 to buy it, you're paying interest on a loan for something that's dropping in value every single month. That said, if the loan has a low interest rate, say under 5%, and the car is something you genuinely need to get to work and earn income, it's a manageable debt. The problem is when people stretch into expensive cars with high monthly payments and high interest rates because they want the car, not because they need the transportation. The version of this that tips into bad debt territory: financing a luxury car at 9% interest when a $12,000 used car would have gotten you to work just as well. You're paying a premium for a depreciating asset with expensive borrowed money. That's a wealth leak. Credit card debt is about as bad as debt gets, and here's why. The interest rates are brutal. We're talking 20, 22, sometimes 28% or higher depending on the card and your credit history. At 22% interest, a $5,000 balance costs you $1,100 a year in interest alone. If you're only making minimum payments, you could be paying that balance off for years and handing over thousands of dollars in interest before the principal even moves much. And unlike a mortgage or a student loan, credit card debt usually isn't buying you an appreciating asset or increasing your earning power. It's buying you things you already consumed: a dinner out, a weekend trip, a clothing haul. There's nothing wrong with those things, but financing them at 22% interest is one of the most expensive ways to pay for anything. The way to use a credit card without it becoming bad debt? Treat it like a debit card. Spend only what you already have in your checking account. Pay the full balance every single month. You get the rewards, you build your credit history, and you pay zero interest. The second you start carrying a balance month to month, the math turns against you fast. If credit card debt is bad, payday loans are in a different category entirely. These are short-term loans, usually a few $100s, designed to get you to your next paycheck. The fees on them often translate to annual interest rates of 300 to 400%. That is not a typo. They're designed to be hard to escape. People take one out in an emergency, can't pay it back in full, roll it over, and end up paying 3 or 4 times what they originally borrowed. If you're ever in a position where a payday loan seems like the only option, there are almost always better alternatives. A credit union personal loan, asking your employer for a paycheck advance, or even negotiating a payment plan with whoever you owe. Payday loans should be a last resort that most people never actually need to reach. Not all debt is something to run from. Some debt is a tool, and used correctly, it helps you build wealth faster than you could without it. The key is knowing the difference. Low rate buys an appreciating asset or increases your income. That's a debt worth considering. High rate buys something that loses value or disappears. That's a debt to eliminate as fast as possible. Look at every debt you're carrying right now and ask those 2 questions. Rate and return. The answers tell you exactly where to focus your energy. If this reframed how you think about debt, hit subscribe. We put out videos like this every single week. Real financial concepts explained without the jargon. And if you've got a money question you want us to cover, drop it in the comments. We read all of them.